Jimmy, and welcome back to my channel. I am going to do a video today on the book that we're reading, The Highly Sensitive Person by Dr. Elaine Aron. And last week I did a video on the 8 habits for self-care for HSPs, and it just includes my morning routine. Nothing big and fancy, just some little self-care tips that I use, and it changes periodically depending on my stage in life and the weather, all kinds of variables, but that's what I do now. So check that out below if you want to. And I said that that would kind of take place of chapter 1, but I do want to just go over some highlights, and then after I go over the highlights, I'm going to turn the camera around and do chapter 2 with facing the book so that I can show you some things that I highlighted, and I just want to see how it works doing it that way for a little bit. So chapter 1 was called The Facts About Being Highly Sensitive. And the reason I didn't go over this one in depth is because the preface and the introduction talk so much about what they talked about in here, but there was a few things I just didn't want to keep repeating things and make it boring. So, and also just to let you know, I am learning this along with you. I have been interested in this topic for several years and have been studying it on and off, and just decided to revisit it again after having some more therapy and realizing that I do need to pay more attention to my highly sensitive trait, because certain things in my life like insomnia and some health issues, and a lot of these issues can be resolved if I just take care of my sensitive nervous system, my highly sensitive trait that I was born with. And I am already seeing strides in a positive direction just from being aware of it more and trying to incorporate those self-care habits into my life and studying about it. So that's what spurred me to read this book again and to study it. So I thought I would just do it with you. So on page 7 of my book is called The Good News and the Not So Good. And she talks about the levels of stimulation that go unobserved by others. It is not that your hearing, vision, or other senses are more acute. And she talks about it's not that we have better senses, and we mentioned this in the last video. It's not that we have better senses, it's that the processing is deeper, and we reflect more on everything. So that's the difference. And she says this greater awareness of the subtle tends to make you more intuitive, which simply means picking up and working through information in a semi-conscious or unconscious way. The result is that you often just know without realizing how. Furthermore, this deeper processing of subtle details causes you to consider the past or the future more. You just know how things got to be the way they are, or how they are going to turn out. And this is that sixth sense that she keeps talking about, and that we feel. I always feel like I have a sixth sense. I feel like I can predict what might happen next, and I don't know, it's like a level, it's not just intuition, it feels like a level above that. So, and I feel like I've had it my whole life, and I'll give you some examples in a minute. Your intuition is right often enough that HSPs tend to be visionaries, highly intuitive artists or inventors, as well as more conscientious, cautious, and wise people. The downside of the trait shows up at more intense levels of stimulation. And she talks about what is highly arousing for most people causes us to become frazzled until we reach a shutdown point. And then it talks about Pavlov, the Russian psychologist, who was convinced that the most basic inherited difference among people was how soon they reached the shutdown point, and that the quick to shut down have a fundamentally different type of nervous system. To me, that stuck out, that we have a fundamentally different type of nervous system. So we have to treat it differently. It's not like the majority. And so we need to really put things into practice, and I'm really excited about learning how to manage my highly sensitive trait so that I can thrive physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all the things. Still in that same subchapter, she says, like the fire department, we HSPs mostly respond to false alarms, but if our sensitivity saves a life, even once, it's a trait that has a genetic payoff. And there are two examples that came to my mind. And one is when I was little, and I didn't have much supervision growing up at all. You know, my mother worked full time, and then even in the evenings or weekends, she was traveling or gone a lot. So we were left without a lot of supervision a lot of the time. And I know that's not good. But so one situation, and this is not a good situation, I needed a ride somewhere, and I accepted a ride from an older man who I think lived in our neighborhood, and I got in the car with him, and he was taking me to the store. I needed some stuff from the store, and I got a weird feeling. I just really got a weird feeling. I'm like, this is not good. I should not be here. And I just knew it, you know, and I didn't realize all this till looking back years later. But I knew I couldn't act scared. I felt like it was going to be a struggle to get out of the car. So I acted happy and acted normal. And I said, oh, I really have to go to the bathroom before we get there. And I think I said that. Yeah, I need to go to the bathroom. I think that's what I said. I need to go to the bathroom. There was a fast food place, and I said, oh, can we stop here and let me go to the bathroom real quick? I'll be right back. I forgot to go before I left. And he's like, okay. And I guess I was convincing. So we stopped at the fast food place, and I went into the bathroom, and I just didn't come out. And then I was looking for a window to climb out of. I know this is crazy for a child, but this was my childhood, and I knew I felt threatened. I knew there was something wrong with that situation, and I had to get out. And I knew if I tried struggling with him that I wouldn't get out. So I just stayed in the bathroom. I mean, I must have stayed in the bathroom for 15 minutes to half an hour, and then I kept poking my head out to see. And then when I finally did go up and look out the window, I could see his car. So I was waiting for his car to leave, and finally his car left. You know, after 15 or 20 minutes, his car left. And then I came out of the bathroom. I don't even remember if I walked back home or what I did, but I was like, whew, got out of that situation. And I knew it was something. I could just tell he was a creepy guy that was up to no good. So, you know, obviously after that, I learned my lesson to not, you know, get in the car with strange people. But I feel like that may have saved my life or saved some kind of trauma because I just had that sixth sense. So that was one situation. And the other situation is as an adult, I remember we were taking I have 4 children, and we were taking 3 of them to a play in the city, a show. And my one, Michael, he was probably 5. It was a Little House on the Prairie play. We were going into the city, and then my husband pulled the car over, our mom van, as my kids would call it. We pulled over and decided that we would get out while he would go park the car, and then we would wait for him in front of the theater. So we got out of the car, and Michael, there was the van here, and there were cars going past. We got out of the sidewalk over here, and the cars were over here. Here's the van. He got out and started going like this, right into the traffic. And right away, I was like, it just, like I knew, and I looked around, and I grabbed him up, like right before he got on the other side of the van. Whew. I still have dreams where I wake up trying to catch him before he gets hit by the cars. But I really do feel like that just not so much the intuition, but reflexes, and you know, and that could happen to any parent. That doesn't have to be an HSP trait, but it could have been. I could have saved his life. I did save his life. Not I could have, I did, because I mean, there were so many cars whizzing by. He would have definitely, that would have been bad. So I get chills and my hair stand up on my arms just thinking about that. But I got him. It's my fault in the first place for letting him get out and not holding his hand right away. But, we had, the other kids were getting out, and, you just do the best you can. And so, whew. So those two situations, I feel like my sensitivity helped in those situations, and my sixth sense as well. All right, and then it talks about, the subtitle is more about stimulation, and this stuck out to me as well. It says, often we can get used to stimulation, but sometimes we think we have and aren't being bothered, but suddenly we feel exhausted and we don't know why. We've been putting up with something at a conscious level while it was actually wearing us down. So that is something that I have been paying attention to more recently, is certain people, certain situations, certain atmospheres where nothing bad blatantly happens, but we feel exhausted and drained afterwards. And that can be overstimulation. It can be someone's high energy that we're absorbing, and most HSPs are also empaths. So I know for me, when I am around someone who is very upset or has some kind of heavy negative energy, I absorb it. And then afterwards I feel, oh, why am I so tired? All I did was go talk to somebody for half an hour or visit with somebody, and I feel like super exhausted and drained. So I feel like it helps me to be aware of what I feel like after I am around a certain situation or an atmosphere or certain people, and if I feel drained afterwards, and look at that and see if that has to do with overstimulation, because for me it usually does. So that's a big thing, is self-awareness. And then it talks about, think back to one or more times that your sensitivity has saved you or someone else from suffering, great loss, or even death. And that's the two examples I just gave you. So let me know if you can remember any times in your childhood or adulthood where you feel like your sensitivity has saved you or someone else. I would love to hear about that. And then it talks about, you are a minority whose rights to have less stimulation are generally ignored. That is so true. What else? There's so much good stuff in here. Sometimes when I have heart palpitations, and it says sometimes we don't realize that our heart may be pounding from the sheer effort of processing extra stimulation. So that can cause it too. So it's not always, fear or anxiety. It can just simply be overstimulation. So I try to now be self-aware and take care of those things that I think are overstimulating and see if that resolves my issues. And usually it does. And it talks about our minds work differently, so we have to approach life differently. And it says we don't want to be self-righteous about this, and I am sorry if I seem that way. I don't mean to seem that I think that highly sensitive people are superior in any way, shape, or form. I don't mean that at all. I just need to realize that I have to approach things differently. And also, just starting this study, I get excited and get a little ahead of myself. So I'll try to bring it down a notch. And then, now I'm on page 11, which may be different with your book, but it's under the subtitle, Your Trait Really Does Make You Special. After I just said we don't want to be self-righteous. It says, we are so skilled, but alas, when being watched, timed, or evaluated, we often cannot display our competence. Our deeper processing may make it seem that at first we are not catching on, but with time we understand and remember more than others without the trait. And that is so true. Even just doing this video, My boys are upstairs asleep. My husband is at work, and I feel like I'm pretty okay doing this video. If my husband is sitting over there, and he doesn't even care about this, it's not like he would pay attention, or half the time he doesn't hear me anyway, which is fine, but just him sitting there, I can't do this. It's like I feel it just messes me up. It messes my system up. So that can be tricky. All right, talks about our nervous systems. This was going to be short. Says we need to think about our trait as neutral. It becomes an advantage or disadvantage only when you enter a particular situation. Okay. Here's another thing about how every type of person is valuable. It says, of course, it is also good to have quite a few in a group who are not so alert, to all the dangers and consequences of every action. They will rush out without a whole lot of thought to explore every new thing or fight for the group or territory. Every society needs both. So that's just another reminder that we are not superior in any way. It's just a different trait that we need to acknowledge and take care of. We spend so much time thinking about things like the meaning of life and death and how complicated everything is, not black and white thoughts at all. Since most non-HSP do not seem to enjoy thinking about such things, they assume we must be unhappy doing all that pondering. And that is so true as well. I have had people in the past, well, one example is I had this friend and we talked about very deep things like all the time. That was just what we did. And it was fun. And we both got so into it. And this friend is like, I love talking with you, you're different. And now looking back, this friend was probably an HSP. I remember this friend came to visit me when I was living outside of DC, and we were having these deep conversations, which were so much fun and stimulating, and I loved them. And my roommate at the time came in the room, and she was like acting a little strange, like almost like trying to get me out of that situation. I just didn't realize what was going on until afterwards. And then my friend left. And then my roommate came in and said, I saw that you were having this conversation and I just wanted to save you from it. Oh, that must have been terrible, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That was so much fun. I love having those conversations. So this is true. I've had people tell me to lighten up, when I feel it's just normal for me. Most of you probably do too, especially if you're a highly sensitive person. So it can be misconstrued and it's not fun for everybody. So we also need to remember that. I need to remember that when dealing with the general population, and friends and relatives who don't enjoy that. I just assume everybody does until I read this and learned about it, that I do need to lighten up when I'm around certain people because they just don't enjoy that. So it's like we have to not change, but just, I feel like for me, I need to be more aware of people around me and what kind of conversation to have when I'm around them. And that might help me a little socially too. I feel like for me, I need to be more aware of the people that I'm around and what they might need from the conversation. And so I just want to be sensitive to that. And not everybody wants a deep conversation after 5 minutes of meeting them. All right. And to sum that thought up, it says HSPs prefer the good feeling of being very conscious, very human, even if what we are conscious of is not always cause for rejoicing. It's almost like being in the present moment and looking at things deeply and finding the truth in things. That's so exciting for me. And, the shallow small talk, I can do it, but it's so draining for me. It takes more effort for me to do the small talk and chat and gab and all that stuff than it does to just talk about something real and lay my feelings out on the table and my heartache, whatever, my even positive, my rejoicing. It's so much easier for me to talk about those things than that small talk So, and that's, I think, common with highly sensitive people too, that small talk is really draining. But we live in an extroverted society, so I do have to learn how to navigate that. And I need to strike a balance. We need to strike a balance. Okay, what else in chapter 1? There's so much. One interesting thing, this is on page 15 of my book, learning about our culture, what you don't realize will hurt you. They did research studies in different countries to learn about the trait and how it affected people, and to see what traits made children more popular. And in China, shy and sensitive children were among those most chosen by other friends to be playmates. So the shy and the sensitive was valued in Asia, but then in Canada, shy and sensitive children were among the least chosen. Chances are this is the kind of attitude you faced growing up. Think about the impact on you of not being the ideal for your culture. So, in the Western culture, shy and sensitive and, polite and quiet is looked down upon usually. You need to be aggressive and bold and say what you mean. They're totally different cultures with totally different values. So that can affect you as a child growing up in a culture that values the opposite of what your natural traits are. So that's something to consider. And I found that so interesting. Another thing is introversion is usually looked down upon. Introversion is usually looked on as a bad thing. And here Dr. Aron says, research has found that most people, quite wrongly, associate introversion with poor mental health. And it says it helps to know that in cultures in which the trait is more valued, such as Japan, Sweden, and China, the research takes on a different tone. For example, Japanese psychologists seem to expect their sensitive subjects to perform better, and they do. When studying stress, Japanese psychologists see more flaws in the way that the non-sensitive cope. So it's opposite. In Japan, the introversion would be looked on as someone who performs well, and it would be seen as a positive thing. And aggressive and extroverted and the opposite of highly sensitive, they would think something's wrong. And that would be looked down upon. So much of it just has to do with our culture. These are innate traits that are not good or bad, and they shouldn't be judged. We just need to see it as neutral, and different cultures see it different ways. So I found that really interesting. There's more about the roles that HSPs play. If there's something in this first chapter that stuck out to you, then please let me know. So that's pretty much a review of chapter 1. I didn't mean to go into it as much as I did, but it's just so good. Now I'm going to turn the camera around and quickly review chapter 2 with the camera on the book. Okay, so now we will look over chapter 2, hopefully briefly. It's just so hard to do this quickly, and I know I don't want to make videos long and boring. So anyway, this one's called Digging Deeper, Understanding Your Trait for All That Is. And I'll just go over some highlighted quotes that stuck out to me. All right, now let's rearrange your mental furniture and make it impossible for you to doubt the reality of your trait. This is important, for the trait has been discussed so little in the field of psychology. We'll look at a case history as well as scientific evidence. It tells about Rob and Rebecca, twins. Rob was highly sensitive and Rebecca was not. And she says this dispelled any doubts I had about the trait being inheritable. So they were raised in the same household, but yet Rob clearly had the highly sensitive trait and Rebecca did not. So it wasn't dependent on their environment. And Rob was just way more reactionary to things. So it starts as an infant. All right, and this is interesting, rounding out our picture of Rob. Actually, unfair as it is, the difficult aspects of any temperament are displayed more when the home environment is sound. Otherwise, in order to survive, an infant will do whatever he or she must to adapt to the caretakers, with temperament going underground, to resurface in some other way later, perhaps in stress-related physical symptoms. So if the child is allowed to flourish and has a secure, loving home environment, then he or she can display their natural temperament without, being punished for it, so to speak. He has an extraordinary imagination. He is drawn to everything artistic, especially music. All right, and it says, you are truly a different breed. All right, now this talks about the body fluids, blood, urine, and saliva of sensitive children show indications of high levels of norepinephrine present in their brains, especially after the children are exposed to various forms of stress in the laboratory. Norepinephrine is associated with arousal. In fact, it is the brain's version of adrenaline. Sensitive children's body fluids also contain more cortisol, both when under stress and when at home. Cortisol is the hormone present when one is in a more or less constant state of arousal or wariness. And I have had issues with my cortisol, and I've done the saliva testing, and my cortisol was extremely high at times when it wasn't supposed to be high. So a lot of that can be from childhood because our bodies keep the score. I don't know if you've read that book. It's a really good book by, what is that guy's name? Vanderkept. I will leave a link below. I'll put a picture up here. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. And it tells how things in childhood, like if we had trauma, like I did, we get in a constant state of arousal and we don't know how to calm that down as children. So, and highly sensitive people are way more susceptible to that doing long-term damage. So, but as adults, we can reverse it. Okay, so the trait is roughly observable from birth, as was the case with Rob. And it was true with me too. I cried a lot. And I was just scared to try new things at first. And fortunately for me, I had one of my big sisters was very adventurous and fun, and I just followed her around all the time. And it really got me out, and I had fun, and we explored things, and like I said, we had we had no supervision, so we got into a lot of trouble too. But it was a very exciting, adventurous childhood, more like little boys than little girls, because we were just outside doing active things all the time. So that was fun. That helped me come out of my shell. Kagan's conclusion is that persons with a trait of sensitivity or inhibitedness are a special breed. They are genetically quite different, although still utterly human, just as bloodhounds and border collies are quite different, although both are still definitely dogs. This is just, I guess, trying to let us know that our trait is a real thing and that it is in our genes and that we need to pay attention to it. My sense of HSPs from meeting them is that they are indeed a distinct group, separate from the non-sensitive. And again, not superior, just different. All right, your differences are very real. This is a big help because this has helped explain so much in my life. It says, consider how one might have a more active pause to check system. See, and I feel like that pause to check system is kind of what saved me when I was in the car with that man when I was little. Imagine Rob and Rebecca coming to school one morning. Rebecca sees the same classroom, teacher, and children as were there yesterday. She runs off to play. Rob notices that the teacher is in a bad mood. One of the children is looking angry. Some bags are in the corner that were not there before. Rob hesitates and may decide that there's a reason for caution. So sensitivity, the subtle processing of sensory information, is the real difference once again. But This is true. I would see things like Rob does. I don't just go in full force into a situation. I stop and look at things and notice things, and it kind of determines how I'm going to be in that situation. Just a natural thing that HSPs do. This is saying how being sensitive would differ at each stage, and I think that's true. I put in the margins, I think it changes with age and life experience and based on past trauma. So there's so many variables. Okay. This says a secure child feels safe to explore, and new experiences are not usually seen as a threat. Other signs indicate that a child is insecurely attached. The mothers of these children are either too protective or too neglectful or even dangerous. That has an impact. Without secure attachment, a startling experience will produce long-term arousal. So, yeah. Some parents and environments can make matters much worse. Certainly, repeated frightening experiences will strongly reinforce caution, especially experiences of failing to be calmed or helped, of being punished for active exploring, and of having others who should be helpful become dangerous instead. So I experienced a lot of that, and this sounds weird, but I feel like it was fortunate that my mother worked so much and wasn't at home very much. We did not have supervision most of the time, like I said, but I was able to explore. We were able to not have that tension and fighting and chaos in the house while she was gone. So, I spent the majority of my childhood, just with my sisters and me alone, and I loved it. Yes, I was scared, and yes, I had issues of insecurity. I felt scared to do a lot of things, so those were negative, but there were some positives too. I was able to be who I wanted to be during those times. Depth psychologists place great emphasis on the unconscious and the experiences embedded there, repressed or simply pre-verbal, that continue to govern our adult life. Like I said, the body keeps the score. Falling asleep, staying asleep, and going back to sleep when awakened require an ability to soothe oneself to feel safe in the world. And I'm still working on that today. I'm still working on that. And I do a lot of meditation and things to soothe myself, and it does work, but I have a problem with insomnia. Bad. And I feel like it's getting better, and I'm working on it, though. All right, then it talks about psychotherapy. Carl Jung, Freud's follower for a long time, split with him finally on the issue of the centrality of sexuality. He decided that the fundamental difference was an inherited greater sensitivity. So it's saying that even doctors a long time ago, and philosophers and thinkers and psychotherapists knew about the highly sensitive trait. He believed that when highly sensitive patients had experienced a trauma, sexual or otherwise, they had been unusually affected and so developed a neurosis. He wrote that about HSP is a little known fact. He said that this is really good, even back then, he said a certain innate sensitiveness produces a special prehistory, a special way of experiencing infantile events, and that events bound up with powerful impressions can never pass off without leaving some trace on sensitive people. So our childhoods do affect us, and it's not about blame or blaming anybody or I was treated badly and I hate my parents. It's not that at all. It is about looking at the reality of what our childhoods were like, what our young adulthoods were like, and however old you are up until now, and managing the things that we can. Such people, Jung said, are naturally more influenced by their unconscious, which gives them information of the utmost importance, a prophetic foresight. The unconscious contains important wisdom to be learned. I love this quote, a life lived in deep communication with the unconscious is far more influential and personally satisfying. I totally agree with that. But such a life is also potentially more difficult, especially if in childhood there were too many disturbing experiences without a secure attachment. And that was me. I had so many disturbing experiences without a secure attachment. But not now. I'm healing and taking care of my issues. You have to look at them head on and take care of them. So it's real and it's okay. In the next chapter, you will consider how you may need to live differently from others if you are going to be in healthy harmony with your quite different, highly sensitive body. So that is what I'm looking forward to. It is good to have the foundation of learning about what highly sensitive is and how it affects us and how our childhoods and environments affected us. But this is what I'm really looking forward to, is learning how to live differently if we're going to be in healthy harmony. So that will be good. It says, do not forget that HSPs differ mainly in their sensitive processing of subtle stimuli. This is your most basic quality. That is a positive and accurate way to understand your trait. Okay, so that's good to remember. And then working with what you have learned. This is an activity that she wants you to go through. And after you've finished reading the chapter, just takes you through the activity. So this is good if you wanted to explore that. And then the next chapter will be general health and lifestyle for HSPs. This is what I'm really looking forward to. So I am happy to get through that. I feel like we needed to, though. I needed to get a better foundation. I don't want to just skim through and come up with a few tips that I may or may not put into practice. So I think this is good. So next time we will look at chapter 3. And if you want to follow along, this is the book, The Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron. And I will leave a link below. There is also a link to highly sensitive person test to see if you might have the highly sensitive trait. And I also wanted to let you know that I'm going to probably do these videos every other week. I'm just feeling overwhelmed, and I do want to continue to study because I love it. I'm doing this for me. And this kind of keeps me accountable because I definitely want to keep studying this and to put these things into practice for my own health and my own life journey. I also do planning videos, which is my passion. I just love doing artsy planning stuff, and I love doing that, and it keeps me organized and keeps me creative. Here's some of my journal, and I love it. So if you're interested in some of my planning videos, you can find those below. And I use a system called Planner Perfect, Designs by Planner Perfect. That's the method I basically use, and also supplies by a company called Cocoa Daisy. But you can learn more about that if you want to in my videos below. Thank you so much for watching my video, and don't forget to embrace your gift. Bye.